The FIA has finally broken its silence, declaring that Christian Horner's dismissal was illegal. Will Red Bull be forced to bring him back? Will they have to pay him compensation? If you want the full story, make sure to watch until the very end. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. The entire Formula One universe has been hurled into an unrelenting storm of outrage, speculation, and disbelief after the FIA made public a verdict that has not only shattered Red Bull Racing's facade of control, but has completely ignited one of the most devastating executive scandals in the sport's modern era. The revelation that Christian Horner's removal was not only mishandled but fundamentally unlawful has turned what many initially viewed as a tactical shakeup into a breathtaking exposé of betrayal, corporate sabotage, and power-hungry maneuvering at the highest levels of motorsport. Far from a routine leadership transition, the decision to oust Horner is now seen as a catastrophic misfire, exposing a twisted web of procedural violations, legal misconduct, and ethical failures that threaten to rip through the foundations of Red Bull's multi-billion-dollar racing empire. Behind the scenes, an ultra-discreet inquiry, orchestrated by the FIA with surgical precision, peeled back the polished exterior of Red Bull's internal operations to reveal something far darker. The multi-week probe involved encrypted forensic audits, scrutinized legal correspondence, and back-channel interviews with sources embedded deep within the organization's leadership. According to insiders close to the investigation, the execution of Horner's dismissal was not just abrupt. It was engineered to bypass every safeguard built into the FIA's regulatory architecture. No formal arbitration. No unanimous board resolution. No opportunity for defense. These omissions weren't just oversights. They were deliberate acts that sidestepped the very statutes designed to prevent this kind of rogue corporate warfare. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Legal experts who reviewed sections of the leaked FIA dossier described the findings as staggering in their recklessness. Among the most damning elements is the systematic erosion of Horner's executive protections, especially those written into post-Concord contracts that guarantee procedural fairness for senior team figures. In what's now being called an unprecedented hijack of governance, a faction within Red Bull allegedly staged a covert campaign to dismantle Horner's influence, leveraging newly acquired board power and exploiting ambiguous legal gray areas to execute a lightning-fast coup. This wasn't a breakdown, it was a surgical takedown plotted with chilling precision, aimed not just at removing a figurehead, but at rewriting the team's ideological DNA from the top down. As the FIA's bombshell reverberates across the global paddock, the reaction from drivers, engineers, sponsors, and fans has reached fever pitch. There's talk of mass internal resignations, widespread sponsor unrest, and even murmurs of a Red Bull boycott brewing among key stakeholders. Team principals from rival outfits have publicly expressed alarm, calling for total transparency and accountability. The sport's elite inner circle is now on edge, watching nervously as Red Bull's once impenetrable stronghold shows the first visible signs of collapse. Meanwhile, private meetings are intensifying between Liberty Media executives and FIA officials as they scramble to contain a reputational wildfire that could upend Formula One's image on the eve of its next regulatory era. Christian Horner himself, long regarded as the architect behind Red Bull's unprecedented string of championships, has remained publicly silent, but behind closed doors, his legal team is unleashing a multi-pronged offensive. Documents have already been filed with international arbitration courts, alleging a breathtaking series of violations, from breached confidentiality covenants to contractual sabotage and premeditated reputational damage. Sources with knowledge of the legal strategy suggest that Horner's lawyers are preparing to demand not just compensation, but full reinstatement and an independent tribunal to expose what they describe as a boardroom coup devoid of legitimacy. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. The atmosphere within the Red Bull factory has reportedly turned icy and volatile. Several top-level engineers and department leads, loyal to Horner's leadership style and long-term strategic vision, are said to be weighing their futures, with some rumored to be in quiet talks with rival teams. Morale has plummeted, internal communications are under lockdown, and trust between departments has eroded to historic lows. Even drivers are said to be shaken. Max Verstappen, the face of Red Bull's recent dominance, has requested confidential briefings and is allegedly demanding guarantees that team stability will be restored, or he may explore his exit clauses, should the turbulence persist. The FIA, for its part, has left the door wide open for disciplinary action not just against the Red Bull organization, but against specific executives believed to have masterminded the operation. There's already talk of fines, license reviews, and potential points deductions, not to mention possible criminal referrals should fraud or regulatory tampering be proven in court. International media outlets have descended on the controversy like vultures, amplifying every new leak, quote, and rumor into headlines that stretch far beyond the sports pages. What began as a quiet internal decision has now escalated into a globe-spanning saga of betrayal, manipulation, and institutional failure. With each passing day, new pieces of the puzzle are exposed, painting a picture of a team that may have gambled everything to seize control, only to trigger a meltdown that could haunt them for seasons to come. Financial analysts warn of devastating consequences if sponsors start pulling out en masse. Sports commentators call this the most explosive administrative collapse since the Crashgate scandal. Fans flood online platforms with theories, outrage, and demands for justice. The credibility of Red Bull's leadership is being gutted in real time, and no amount of PR damage control seems capable of putting the genie back in the bottle. What remains to be seen is whether the FIA will take the unprecedented step of installing a temporary external oversight panel to stabilize Red Bull's management, or if Liberty Media will push for a quiet settlement behind the scenes to avoid a prolonged media circus. But one thing is clear to anyone watching: this is not business as usual. This is a reckoning. The scandal has cracked open the glossy exterior of Formula One's most dominant team to reveal a house divided, bleeding influence, and standing on the edge of a cliff it may not recover from. The Christian Horner saga has become something far more than a contract dispute. It's a test of Formula One's soul, and whether power, when unchecked, will be allowed to destroy what the sport has spent decades building. What makes this escalating crisis even more chilling is the bombshell revelation that Christian Horner's agreement with Red Bull Racing wasn't just a typical leadership contract. It was fortified with a labyrinth of binding retention provisions, triggered the moment he led the team to the 2023 Constructors' Championship and propelled Red Bull's brand and commercial influence to unprecedented heights. These stipulations were specifically designed to shield him from backdoor removals, political backstabbing, or orchestrated corporate coups. Yet, despite being embedded with legal concrete, they were allegedly sidestepped through a series of behind-the-scenes tactics that raise serious questions about ethics, legality, and internal sabotage at the very core of one of Formula One's most powerful organizations. Insiders claim that a faction within Red Bull's senior leadership, operating covertly and without full oversight, initiated a campaign aimed at systematically dismantling Horner's authority. This involved retroactively issuing disciplinary allegations, skewing performance assessments, and conducting covert boardroom votes without the full legal attendance required for legitimacy. The goal, it appears, was to fabricate a case for termination while bypassing the bulletproof protections embedded in his agreement. Experts in high-level sports law have pointed out that these alleged breaches go far beyond civil infraction. They could qualify as willful misconduct, opening the door not only for full reinstatement but also for massive financial reparation and potential legal charges against those involved in orchestrating this clandestine takedown. The FIA, rarely known for intervening in internal team conflicts, broke its usual diplomatic silence and issued an unusually pointed public message. In it, the governing body acknowledged significant procedural violations and warned that allowing Formula One teams to function outside the bounds of international labor protections would create a perilous precedent. The very credibility of motorsport's regulatory framework, they warned, was teetering on the edge of collapse. FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem, typically reserved in his responses, has reportedly expressed deep personal disgust over the events that have transpired, and has launched a sweeping independent investigation to audit Red Bull's ethical practices and corporate conduct moving forward. Sources close to the governing body reveal that a specially appointed ethics tribunal, composed of global legal and governance experts, has been activated with full investigatory powers. This panel will have access to internal communications, meeting transcripts, and confidential records, and is empowered to recommend disciplinary action ranging from financial penalties to full team suspension from the championship, an outcome so extreme it has never been witnessed in the modern history of Formula One. The fact that such a threat even exists underscores how deeply this incident has shaken the system's foundation. The situation has intensified even further with the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Lausanne reportedly preparing for emergency proceedings. Officials at the FIA have already submitted preemptive documentation requesting fast-track arbitration readiness, suggesting that legal escalation is all but inevitable. This dispute has rapidly evolved from a private conflict into an existential test of executive rights, contractual sanctity, and governance transparency within elite sport. Team bosses across the paddock have been shaken by the implications. Some have quietly reached out to the FIA for clarity and reassurance, worried that if a high-profile figure like Horner can be surgically ousted under such suspicious circumstances, they could be vulnerable too. Others have chosen silence, wary of jeopardizing future dealings with Red Bull's vast commercial machine. The paddock is on edge, rumors swirl with increasing velocity, and uncertainty looms over every team principal who now questions how insulated their own position really is. The fallout is expanding far beyond Formula One's insulated walls. International business media has picked up the story, drawing comparisons to corporate espionage, while labor watchdogs and EU regulatory bodies are demanding transparency into Red Bull's internal mechanisms. Lawmakers from the European Parliament are reportedly preparing formal inquiries, questioning whether corporate governance laws were violated and whether Red Bull neglected financial reporting obligations by failing to disclose this internal power struggle to stakeholders. Christian Horner, for his part, is not retreating quietly. While public statements remain scarce, sources indicate that his legal camp is mobilizing for an aggressive, comprehensive legal onslaught. They are said to be preparing not just for arbitration, but for broader civil litigation and possibly even criminal proceedings, depending on what internal documentation uncovers. Horner is reportedly furious, feeling not just betrayed but blindsided by a campaign he believes was months, if not years, in the making. His legal team is now poring through archives of emails, board decisions, and HR correspondences, building a case that he was the target of a deliberate campaign to expel him from power through deception and manipulation. This is no longer about a single individual or a contractual disagreement. It's about the architecture of power in the most politically volatile, money-driven, and cutthroat environment in sport. If Horner succeeds in proving his claims, it could lead to an unprecedented reshuffling of Red Bull's top leadership, trigger a wave of sponsorship reviews, and force the FIA to tighten regulatory loopholes it never thought would be exploited. If he fails, it may signal that even the most watertight executive protections can be rendered meaningless in a world where boardroom agendas outweigh principle. Every hour, new whispers emerge, talk of anonymous whistleblowers, encrypted documents, and last-minute meetings held in private locations. There's speculation that other teams may now be auditing their own governance structures, fearing that this debacle has only scratched the surface of what's truly happening behind closed doors in elite motorsport. The scandal is metastasizing into something larger, more unpredictable, more volatile than anything Formula One has dealt with in decades. The true storm, it seems, is only just beginning. As the FIA's revelation sent tremors through the motorsport universe, Red Bull's executive machine sprang into motion with breathtaking urgency. Within minutes of the announcement, the team lodged a fierce formal objection, activating a little-known procedural clause typically reserved for extreme grievances. The document, drafted with cutting precision, accused the FIA of distortion, prejudice, and procedural violations, declaring the governing body's verdict not only unjust but damaging to the very fabric of sporting integrity. Yet even as this legal barrage was launched into the public arena, the true drama, the devastating rupture within Red Bull Racing, was unfolding away from cameras and press conferences, buried in hushed conversations, encrypted messages, and strategic resignations behind closed doors. Within the walls of their high-tech headquarters, a bitter internal struggle now consumes the organization. Insiders depict a climate of unease and disorder unlike anything the team has faced before. Deep fractures have formed between long-standing leadership figures. Helmut Marko, once considered Christian Horner's most trusted ally and confidant, is said to have shifted his support toward the interim leadership team, a move that has deeply alienated core departments. Several lead engineers, performance analysts, and high-ranking operations directors have reportedly threatened immediate exit unless the decision surrounding Horner's removal is reversed or addressed in a transparent, just manner. They argue that the handling of his dismissal was devoid of respect, process, or principle, an act of betrayal by a team that once thrived on unity. In an unprecedented move, legal personnel have swarmed the building, occupying conference rooms and combing through years of correspondence, meeting records, and procedural documents in an attempt to reconstruct the chain of events that led to Horner's abrupt removal. The aim, according to sources close to the investigation, is to either validate the dismissal with ironclad evidence or dismantle the case entirely to build a countersuit. Multiple departments have suspended routine activities, citing internal instability. One simulator team reportedly walked out mid-session, citing an intolerable environment of surveillance and suspicion. HR personnel have been replaced, confidentiality clauses have been re-signed, and conversations that once took place face-to-face now occur via lawyers and intermediaries. Christian Horner, once hailed as the strategic mastermind behind Red Bull's unprecedented success, now finds himself portrayed as a casualty of boardroom ambition and corporate politics. Those close to him describe a man consumed by fury and disbelief, oscillating between vengeful resolve and psychological exhaustion. Since the FIA's ruling, Horner has withdrawn completely, cutting all public communication, refusing press engagements, and turning down media opportunities that would have once been unthinkable for the seasoned figurehead. It is said he ignored a direct outreach from a major British broadcaster and declined to comment even as rumors about his future spread like wildfire across digital platforms. One eyewitness described a scene of explosive emotion when the termination letter arrived. Horner reportedly shattered a glass award against the office wall and shouted with searing intensity, accusing unnamed forces of trying to erase decades of legacy with a single signature. He has not vanished, however. Behind the scenes, Horner has assembled a coalition of powerful advisors, a mix of legal juggernauts, crisis image managers, and former team bosses who have themselves survived the political blade of Formula One. Their plan is reportedly twofold: dismantle the narrative pushed by the FIA and Red Bull's new leadership, and simultaneously draft a full exposé detailing the inner politics, financial motives, and personal vendettas that led to his ousting. The first phase of this operation is already underway, with internal emails and confidential memos being compiled for a potential dossier that insiders describe as explosive enough to shake the sport's foundations. Inside the paddock, murmurs about Red Bull's instability are growing louder. Several rival teams have intensified their recruitment efforts, sensing an opening to snatch disillusioned staff from their fiercest competitor. Technical slip-ups, lack of clarity in strategy briefings, and unusually subdued energy from pit crews have raised eyebrows. One senior engineer from a competing constructor noted, "There's blood in the water. It's open season now." Fan reactions have been fierce and polarized. A firestorm of digital opinion has erupted, with supporters passionately defending Horner as the spiritual heart of Red Bull's era of dominance. Others accuse him of fostering a culture of control and secrecy that ultimately led to his downfall. Petitions calling for his return have attracted tens of thousands of names in a matter of hours, while counter-campaigns urge the team to move on and embrace new leadership. Online forums are flooded with speculation, theories, and unverified claims. One post, shared tens of thousands of times, claims that Horner's departure was orchestrated not from within the team, but under pressure from external stakeholders tied to Red Bull's corporate empire, a shadow group with its own long-term strategic interests. Within Red Bull, morale has been shattered. Trust between departments has eroded to a dangerous degree. Teams that once operated with surgical precision now act with hesitation, second-guessing every move in a climate of internal espionage and paranoia. Deadlines have slipped. Performance data is being double-checked with growing anxiety. And through it all, the looming presence of Horner lingers, a ghost haunting the very systems he once created, a reminder that no empire built on speed, dominance, and ambition is immune to the corrosive power of internal betrayal. This is no longer a question of contracts or protocol. It is a fight for identity, legacy, and control. Red Bull's image has been one of unstoppable force, but behind the branding lies a storm of competing agendas and unresolved vendettas. And at the heart of it stands a man unwilling to vanish quietly. Horner's silence may be temporary, but his determination appears boundless. The war has only just begun. And if what's coming next lives up to the private whispers now circulating through the paddock, Formula One is about to witness a reckoning unlike anything in recent history. Christian Horner's legal strike is evolving into a fierce, full-blown offensive that's beginning to shake the foundations of Red Bull from the inside out. No longer just a defensive maneuver, this is now a meticulously orchestrated campaign fueled by some of the most elite legal minds in international sports law, individuals who've taken on global federations, dismantled governing bodies, and exposed hidden corruption in major leagues. These aren't just lawyers. They're legal tacticians trained for high-profile warfare, and they've made Horner's cause their battlefield. Their mission is not survival. It's retribution, financial justice, and total reputational restoration, and they're attacking on multiple fronts with ruthless precision. One strategic pathway is an aggressive financial reclamation push, where Horner's attorneys are tearing apart the fine print of his executive agreement. They're demanding not just unpaid earnings, but performance-linked rewards, equity entitlements, hidden clauses, and compensation packages stacked with incentives tied to victories, sponsorship surges, and long-term project milestones. The numbers being cited behind closed doors are staggering: far beyond early estimates. What began as a rumored dispute over bonus payments has morphed into a multi-million-dollar legal siege with potential ripple effects across the entire F1 financial architecture. According to individuals familiar with the documentation, the compensation demands could dwarf what any F1 executive has ever extracted from a team, setting a new benchmark for executive contracts in the sport. But the legal narrative intensifies further with a defamation offensive aimed at Red Bull's inner sanctum. Horner's legal camp insists that high-ranking personnel from the company deliberately engineered a reputational takedown by filtering manipulated evidence to strategically chosen media allies. This wasn't accidental. This was precision sabotage, planned and executed to trigger public distrust, sponsor anxiety, and internal collapse of authority. His lawyers are working to unmask a calculated effort to distort facts, bypass internal due process, and corner him into public disgrace before any official verdict could be reached. The idea, they argue, was to destroy his influence without needing to fight him in court. Now the tables are turning, and the press that once carried the leaks is now being monitored for metadata, timestamps, and traceable communications. If evidence supports this alleged smear operation, it could erupt into a courtroom drama that reaches far beyond the paddock. The most controversial legal maneuver, however, targets Red Bull's command base in Austria. Horner's legal advisors are preparing a cross-border labor rights case, accusing the parent company of illegal intervention in matters governed under British employment protections. They allege that Austrian executives unlawfully dictated decisions and manipulated internal proceedings without respecting jurisdictional limits. What started as an internal HR issue may soon become an international labor law confrontation involving European employment courts. If successful, this claim could shatter the illusion of corporate invulnerability for multinational teams operating across legal systems. Executives who believed they could pull strings from overseas without consequence are now being dragged into the spotlight, and some are reportedly panicking. 2 Austrian executives summoned for sworn testimony have taken the unprecedented step of requesting diplomatic immunity before appearing. That detail alone has triggered a wave of speculation. What could they possibly fear exposing? Some insiders whisper about deep political entanglements, with one figure allegedly connected to confidential government initiatives or economic intelligence partnerships. If verified, the scandal would cross over from a legal dispute into geopolitical tension, dragging governmental entities into the conflict and possibly igniting investigations at a continental scale. The consequences inside Red Bull Racing are already reverberating. Team morale is fractured, sponsors are uneasy, and key figures in the organization are scrambling to distance themselves from internal politics. A quiet exodus is brewing, as insiders grow wary of being caught in the fallout. Behind the scenes, engineers, strategists, and department leads are reportedly weighing offers from rival teams or discreetly renegotiating clauses in their own contracts to secure protections in case of a major leadership collapse. There are whispers that this legal earthquake may detonate resignations, power shifts, or even a mass reorganization inside Red Bull far beyond anything seen before. Around the paddock, team bosses are studying the case like hawks. No one is speaking openly, but everyone is watching. Contracts are being reviewed. Legal teams across rival garages are suddenly much busier, prepping for contingencies. What Red Bull thought would be a swift disciplinary action has evolved into a sprawling, unpredictable confrontation that threatens to engulf other teams, media houses, and even the sports regulators. Some fear that if certain sealed documents become public during the trial, it could reveal how widespread this style of internal manipulation truly is, not just in Red Bull, but across all major Formula One organizations. The media, once eager to echo the early leaks, is beginning to shift tone. Analysts are now questioning why specific evidence was selectively shared while others were hidden. Journalists are revisiting their sources, rechecking timelines, and realizing they may have been used to advance an agenda rather than report facts. In digital spaces, opinion is splintering, once vocal critics are softening, and a groundswell of support for Horner is emerging. Not out of adoration, but out of a growing belief that this could be a case of corporate betrayal wrapped in propaganda. Behind closed doors, Horner's camp continues gathering witnesses. Former employees, internal whistleblowers, and even past collaborators are reportedly coming forward, some offering sworn affidavits that could turn the narrative upside down. His lawyers are compiling hours of communications, internal reports, and private correspondences that may soon become weapons in court. There are rumors that a classified dossier, assembled by digital forensic specialists, is already complete and being held for the ideal moment to detonate it in public proceedings. This is no longer just about clearing Horner's name. It's become a crusade to expose the machinery of power that operates behind the polished curtain of Formula One. A machine fueled by influence, secrecy, and silent coercion. If his legal team succeeds, the aftershocks could echo far beyond Red Bull, shaking how every team, sponsor, governing body, and media outlet engages with the unseen forces behind the sport. The legal calendar is packed, the stakes are climbing, and the next move could change the landscape of Formula One forever. The Formula One world is teetering on the edge of complete disarray, its community fractured, emotions raw, and allegiances tested like never before. The expulsion of Christian Horner has ignited a firestorm that refuses to die down. The grid has never felt so tense, with silence from some camps only intensifying speculation, while others cautiously step out of the shadows to express guarded yet unmistakable opinions. Toto Wolff, long seen as Horner's sharpest rival, stunned the motorsport world with an unusually heartfelt comment, saying, "No one, regardless of team lines or past conflicts, should be subjected to such treatment." It was a moment that sent shockwaves through garages and hospitality suites alike, the kind of statement that peels away the layers of corporate coldness and reveals the human cost behind the polished press conferences. Zak Brown, never one to stay quiet in the face of systemic issues, hinted at something far more unsettling, a deeper flaw within the sport's power structure, warning that this incident has cracked open a long-ignored conversation about leadership, control, and unchecked authority. Online, the situation has erupted into something far bigger than Formula One. This isn't just paddock gossip or backroom drama, this is a digital revolution. Trending across every major platform are emotionally charged tags like #JusticeForHorner and #FATruth, each one backed by millions of angry, heartbroken, and mobilized fans who feel robbed of transparency. The comment sections are overflowing with fierce debates, outrage, and theories ranging from insider betrayal to political manipulation. Entire fan pages have transformed into resistance hubs, organizing merchandise boycotts, planning awareness campaigns, and calling for a worldwide fan-led investigation into Red Bull's top-level decisions. TikTok is flooded with emotional edits showcasing Horner's legacy, layered with dramatic soundtracks and tear-jerking slow-motion clips. On Reddit, armchair investigators are dissecting every frame of post-race footage, zooming in on facial expressions, scrutinizing behind-the-scenes interactions, and connecting dots that may or may not even exist, because right now, belief in the narrative has crumbled. And despite the avalanche of outrage and the thunderous condemnation from the FIA's report, which many described as relentless and staggering, Red Bull is holding its ground. Instead of showing signs of regret or reconsideration, the organization is locking into its version of the story with an intensity that borders on defiance. They insist the matter was beyond repair, framing it as a choice forced upon them, not made willingly. Words like irreversible and inevitable now define their public stance. But whispers coming from deep within the corridors of the team suggest otherwise. Rumors are surfacing that one of Red Bull's most high-profile sponsors, arguably the backbone of its financial muscle, is growing uncomfortable. Inside sources reveal that discussions are already underway to assess the feasibility of stepping away from the partnership, citing unbearable reputational exposure and growing concerns from stakeholders. Behind the glossy facade of brand logos and champagne celebrations, an internal storm is gathering. High-ranking executives are said to be in a state of near panic, calling for emergency consultations with shareholders at the Austrian headquarters. Tensions within the board have reportedly reached boiling point. Some are demanding a public backtrack, fearing the continued resistance could lead to a spiraling collapse of trust among fans, partners, and even within the team's workforce. Others, determined to project strength, insist that reversing course would only fuel more scrutiny. These internal battles are no longer just about one man. They've become a clash between corporate survival instincts and moral accountability. Meanwhile, legal engines are revving in the background. It's being whispered in hushed tones that Horner's legal team is quietly preparing to mount a powerful counteroffensive. Though no official action has been filed, multiple sources close to the matter suggest that behind closed doors, negotiations are already happening. These aren't just about payouts. They're about vindication. About restoring a reputation crushed in the span of days. About forcing the world to look again at the face it was so quick to judge. If the case does escalate to court, the discovery process could open the floodgates to years of buried secrets, emails, recordings, boardroom conversations, all dragged into public light. At the same time, investigative journalists from around the globe are circling, digging deeper, building timelines, identifying whistleblowers, and crafting exposés designed to detonate with maximum impact. One highly anticipated documentary series is already rumored to be in production, aiming to trace the entire downfall moment by moment, from the first rumblings of unrest to the boardroom vote that sealed Horner's fate. Nothing will be off limits, and if these projects succeed in exposing internal conflicts, shadow deals, or hidden motives, Formula may first find itself in the crosshairs of public scrutiny like never before. The FIA, though officially reserved, is said to be quietly shaken by the magnitude of this crisis. Behind the scenes, a flurry of activity is underway. Drafts of potential policy changes are already being passed between departments, outlining new frameworks for team leadership review, transparency mandates, and ethics boards that could strip back the layers of unchecked authority that currently dominate the sport. It's not just Red Bull under the microscope anymore. This situation is setting a precedent. A warning shot. A message that the old rules no longer apply, and that the structures built in the shadows may no longer be tolerated in the daylight of global accountability. And still, through it all, Christian Horner remains silent. His absence is haunting. He hasn't issued a statement. He hasn't given interviews. He hasn't responded to the tidal wave of public support crashing in his favor. To some, that silence feels strategic. To others, it's heartbreaking. Yet it lingers heavier with each passing day, symbolic of a deeper rupture, one that extends beyond a single career and speaks to the soul of a sport caught between its glamorous facade and the very real people it so often forgets. Whether he returns to the spotlight or fades into private life, one thing is clear: Formula One will never be the same. The mask has slipped, and what lies beneath is not just controversy, it's revolution. As the countdown to the next Formula One Grand Prix continues, the spotlight has drifted far from lap times, tire strategies, and aerodynamic upgrades. Instead, it now beams unrelentingly on boardroom secrets, ethical dilemmas, and the crumbling walls of executive immunity. Christian Horner, once revered as the mastermind behind Red Bull Racing's meteoric rise, is no longer just a team principal under pressure. He has become the central figure in a crisis shaking the sport to its very core. What began as murmurs of internal unrest has escalated into a firestorm of speculation, as legal experts, team insiders, and millions of fans across the globe scrutinize every move, every statement, every silence. The name that once symbolized consistent success, relentless ambition, and strategic brilliance is now entangled in a vortex of controversy that refuses to fade. The announcement by the FIA wasn't just another line in a press release. It felt like a detonation. It cracked open the illusion of untouchable leadership in a sport long dominated by power plays and backstage maneuvering. No longer is Formula One's drama confined to overtakes and pit stops. Now the real intrigue lies in legal offices, in boardrooms, and in the whispered conversations that happen when cameras aren't rolling. This isn't just a dispute over regulations or technical gray areas. It's a potentially transformative moment that calls into question the very fabric of team leadership, organizational conduct, and corporate responsibility at the pinnacle of motorsport. At Red Bull's headquarters, the mood is far from celebratory. There is a visible tension in the corridors where once there was swagger. The personnel, known for their razor-sharp execution and unity, now operate under the weight of internal uncertainty. Though the results on the circuit remain dominant, behind the scenes there's a growing unease that even trophies can't mask. Christian Horner, the architect of a modern dynasty, is now a man fighting for professional survival. The shock isn't just in the accusations themselves, but in the ripple effect they've triggered throughout the paddock. Within other teams, there's both alarm and quiet satisfaction. For years, some rivals have muttered about Red Bull's overwhelming influence and Horner's confident, sometimes combative style. Now, as scrutiny intensifies, those whispers have become louder, emboldened by the thought that the era of unchecked control may finally be faltering. But the implications stretch far beyond individual rivalries. Every senior figure in Formula One is watching closely, aware that the fallout could reshape the norms that have governed the sport for decades. There's a growing realization that the age of opaque governance might be drawing to a close, and that transparency is no longer optional, it's demanded. From major sponsors to minor stakeholders, the reaction has been swift and pointed. Questions are being asked, real, difficult, uncomfortable questions about oversight, workplace culture, and ethical standards. Companies that have poured millions into partnerships are no longer content with press releases and rehearsed answers. They want truth, clarity, and proof that the institutions they support operate with integrity. The reputational stakes have never been higher. In this new landscape, image management isn't enough. Authentic accountability is the new currency. And amid all of this, the FIA finds itself in an unprecedented position. For years accused of selective enforcement or delayed responses, the governing body now faces the immense challenge of navigating the situation with both firmness and fairness. Their actions will reverberate for years, setting a benchmark for how future controversies are handled. This is no routine investigation. It's a defining moment that could either restore trust or deepen existing fractures in the sport's governance. Every decision, every delay, every word is under a microscope. The world is watching, and there's no room for missteps. Meanwhile, fans, who once engaged primarily with on-track heroics, are now gripped by a very different kind of narrative. This isn't about pole positions or championship points. It's about power, ethics, truth, and consequence. The court of public opinion has become a key arena, and social media platforms are ablaze with theories, leaks, and passionate commentary. Supporters aren't just bystanders anymore. They're participants in the unfolding drama, demanding accountability with unprecedented volume. They are no longer satisfied with vague denials or half-hearted apologies. They want answers, and they want them now. Even the drivers, often insulated from executive-level politics, are beginning to feel the tremors. While many avoid public comments, privately there is concern about leadership stability, about team morale, about the potential for long-term damage to the sport's reputation. Behind closed doors, agents and legal advisors are evaluating contracts with fresh eyes, ensuring that protections are in place should the turbulence worsen. In an environment where every headline matters, no one wants to be collateral damage. As this saga unfolds, it exposes a profound tension at the heart of Formula One, the clash between tradition and transformation, between power concentrated in the hands of a few and the growing demand for collective responsibility. Christian Horner's predicament is merely the flashpoint. What it reveals is a system that may no longer be compatible with the values of a modern, global, hypervisible audience. It's a wake-up call not just for Red Bull, but for the entire grid. For years, executive behavior was shrouded in privilege and protected by performance. That protection is eroding, and the ramifications are impossible to ignore. And yet, the show must go on. The teams will arrive at the next race. The engines will roar to life. The world will tune in. But the narrative has changed forever. The sport has crossed a threshold. This isn't just about one man's fall from grace, it's about an entire ecosystem coming to terms with its shadow. What emerges from this storm may look very different from what came before. Because Formula One is no longer just about who wins on Sunday. It's about who stands tall when the lights go out, not on the grid, but in the places no one ever thought to look.